Most of you are aware of all the campgrounds that are in Michigan, all the recreation areas that are out there, and you probably all have used them. But Michigan also has many wilderness areas. There are 10 state wilderness areas and 5 federal wilderness areas in Michigan, and we're going to talk about a few of them tonight. We'll be talking about Big Island Lake, Sylvania Tract, which is just goes by Sylvania Wilderness, and Nordhaus Dunes. And of the 15 wilderness areas that I had to choose from, I picked these 3 primarily because they were canoe and kayak accessible. The whole purpose for me of doing this was to explore these by boats that I could carry in and around these areas. Some of the wilderness areas, like the McCormick Wilderness, are more for backpacking or snowshoeing, sledding, things like that. So I chose the 3 that were the most paddle friendly because that's one of the main things that I do. I also hike, but I excluded some of those others, and we'll touch on those at the end of what's out here in Michigan. So we started off with Big Island Lake Wilderness, and it's managed by the Pictured Rocks folks in the Munising area. It's not publicized a lot. It's hard to get a brochure. They will give you one at the Munising Ranger Station, but it's pretty much a self-check-in. There's no cost for any permits to use the area. There's no reservations for campsites. It's first come, first serve, and it's just one of those quiet little secrets that exists in Michigan, south of Munising, about 45 miles. And unless you already know a little bit about the Big Island area, it's hard to get the rangers to want to talk about it because they just don't want it flooded with people, because it's a very small area and would not do well with large crowds, very limited. But what makes a wilderness area? Leave no trace principles apply in a wilderness area. You're going to find a lot more rules and regulations in those areas. Any of the state or federal lands that are part wilderness areas are open to the public. The LNT principles, all of you should know these. Plan ahead and prepare, travel and camp on durable surfaces, dispose of waste properly, leave what you find, minimize fire impacts, respect wildlife, be courteous. That's kind of the core of wilderness etiquette out there. And most of the rules and regs that apply are how they define that. When it gets into things like bottles and cans and debris, it falls into one of these categories. They also have a few other extra rules. No wheeled vehicles, like you might have the little dollies for kayaks or canoes, or any other mechanical devices. And that's another great debate for folks sitting around in the campfire as far as why, but one of the reasons is just to keep all of the industrial mechanical things out, like wheelbarrows, and then the bicycles want to come in. There's nothing wrong with bicycles, but the wilderness areas are trying to be managed to have foot traffic only, and it's really hard to enforce that unless you make the rules very specific. Group size is limited to no more than 10 persons for day use, and no more than 6 persons per campsite. And this changes from wilderness area to wilderness area. It's a pretty general rule. This is the one specifically for Big Island, but you always need to check in to see exactly what they are. But like I said in the beginning, Big Island has a first come, first serve, no permit type of facility. So it's really important to honor those. It does have fire rings at the designated sites, and they do not want fires outside of those fire rings. As I said, glass containers are prohibited. Can prohibitions vary? Sometimes a few of the sites will allow certain cans if you're packing them out, so you always want to check just to be sure. Sometimes people forget, they might bring in canned food and they're going to pack out the cans, but you just want to be sure. Again, the whole idea is that if you don't bring a can or a bottle into the wilderness, no one else is going to find it because somebody forgot it. And that's how the stuff gets left there. You're not to dispose of soaps or detergents or anything including biodegradable soaps and detergents, in any of the lakes or streams. And you can't store equipment, stage anything called caching for more than 24 hours anywhere. And people would go into these wilderness areas and dump equipment off, come back days later, and want to claim that site or that spot. So you're not allowed to do that. Whoops. What did I do? Okay. Camping is prohibited within 100 feet of the river and within 200 feet of any of the lakes or streams except at the designated sites. So the question is, why all the rules? And wilderness areas need protection from overuse and unintentional degradation. Again, places like Big Island, if they were overused and overrun by weekend after weekend, there's never any time for the area to recover. And it's good for the wildlife as well as us. Areas like Big Island Lake can remain as natural conditions as possible. It's a 5,200 acre facility in the Hiawatha National Forest, and it's in the Upper Peninsula near Munising. And so what our party did primarily was just go back into this as a chain of lakes connected, not by any river of any kind, but by small portages. And you start off in Big Island Lake, and you portage into Mid Lake. And very simply, emptying out your canoes and carrying them over the trails. And it limits all the impact on these portages to this area. You can see that it's heavily used. The logs are in there to prevent some erosion. And then back down into the next lake. Most of them are fairly short. It's just a matter of packing and unpacking. It's one of the reasons why canoes are more popular for portaging in these areas, because it's just the ease of loading and unloading. I actually have taught a class on overnight camping and kayaks, where we have taught people some of the tips and techniques that you can make that easier for yourself as far as how to pack, because there are things you can do to make it easy for a kayak. But canoes, as far as getting over the hills and trails, for most of us is preferred vessel. And I've done it both ways. Plus, it's pretty hard to get the Homer bucket into the kayak. So there's 23 lakes in this area, and we'll explore 5. We went on into Town Line Lake and heading into one of the designated sites. You kind of judge by the number of cars in the parking lot whether you're going to run into too many crowds. The Boy Scouts are really popular using this area. And if the parking lot's packed, you pretty much figure that you're not going to get a site. But this is what the not really developed, but designated sites are. Again, we put 6 people on this site and overflowed the rest of the group. We just split up at night for that. It was logged off between 1890 and the 1930s. It's all been regrown since then. And then it was designated a wilderness in 1987 by Congress. And I mentioned this several times throughout the presentation, but the Wilderness Act of 1987 at the federal and the state level was huge for wilderness areas throughout our country. In Michigan, we're blessed with many national forests and recreation areas, and ended up with 15 wilderness areas that are as pristine, if not more pristine, than the day they were made in 1987, or designated. So we do have to crowd the tents in even though we're only having 6 there, a lot of us are solo paddlers and we end up with solo tents. Makes for snoring arguments, more as far as how you spread your tents out and don't have to concern yourself so much with your partner. And just a lot of things growing out there. Black-eyed Susan, just growing naturally, and then looking out from the view from your tent out to one of the lakes. And moonrise on a full moon. That was right before bed. We all went for a late moonlight paddle, but the camera was on wide exposure here, but that was probably about 10 o'clock at night, and it was late July. So so it was staying up late longer, but pretty cool.
Is that a single canoe?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Single canoe, solo canoe. Yes. This seems like the right thing to do. And just some of the natural areas. I mean, the little bogs are really pretty. Things are thriving. You see a lot of little frogs hopping around on there. This is an Adirondack canoe. It's basically a 9-foot canoe. It's more like a kayak that came on here. It weighs about 22 pounds. Pretty easy to toss around. But it's not cheap. We always say that the reason that these lightweight boats are so expensive is they're made up of ground up $100 bills. Whitewater lily. And just, we spent the time that we had out there essentially just exploring the area and the shoreline and anything you could see. Bog rosemary. We had great weather throughout the entire time. Blue flag. We did catch a few walleye back in there. For those that fish, pitcher plant. And portaging into Coattail Lake. We portaged a total of 12 times during the 3-day trip that we were back in there. So essentially, we spent a day going in to the backcountry, spent the second day traveling around the area with empty canoes, and then spent the third day coming back out. White Admiral butterfly. So 6,200 total feet portaged in this trip, 1.2 miles walked. There wasn't a lot. Most of the hills were probably maybe 20-foot gain and drop over the little ridges. You can see some of the glacial action in the area with going over the eskers that divide up the lakes, but there really wasn't a lot of elevation. Partridge berry. And when you're carrying gear and then the canoe, it takes 3 trips for most people, but just once with just an empty canoe. Rose begonia. This is all just from cruising along the shoreline, looking for things to take pictures of.
Can you go, I'm sorry, can
Yeah.
you go back to that last slide?
Yeah.
Before that. Sorry, what were you saying? It takes 3?
Well, typically when you're carrying gear, you're taking 1 trip with the gear, you're walking back, and then you're bringing the canoe over. For most people, including myself, it's difficult to carry all your camping gear and the canoe all in 1 trip.
Do people ever put it on the wheels and pull it?
Not in a wilderness area. It's not allowed in a wilderness area.
It's not allowed?
It's not allowed. No wheels. No wheels or any mechanical devices. If you go to places like the Boundary Waters, wheels are not allowed there either. No mechanical devices. Everything has to be carried in on your back. So I do know a few people that are quite physically fit. I don't consider myself unfit, but if I have 40 pounds of gear and a 40-pound canoe, 80 pounds is a lot of weight to carry. So I just make 2 trips and enjoy the day.
Horses are allowed back there, so if you bring a horse, you can carry it.
Actually, like you look at places like the North Country Trail, horses aren't allowed on the North Country Trail, but alpacas are, because they have a different hoof. Believe it or not, which is a whole separate presentation I've done on the North Country Trail. But if you read some of the things, do not, what you can and can't bring, based on the hoof of the pack animal, that's what determines what's allowed on some of the trails, especially the North Country Trail. So if you got an alpaca, you can just put all your gear and you're good.
Like a good side gig for someone who
Yeah.
owns an alpaca.
You could rent alpacas for backpacking.
Just bring people back and shuttle people.
Yeah.
Like a good business.
Yeah.
I've
So-
seen people do it.
So getting back to the first question, generally what I do is I carry my gear first. It allows me to sightsee everything and scope out the trail, any hazards or anything to look at. And I leave my gear at the end, and then I go back. And for me, it's just a great rest break and enjoy the being outdoors. And you get back, pick up your boat, and back you go. Small cranberry, and just coming off another one of the portages. And this is one of the fire rings you find in the campground. And believe it or not, sometimes in the evening that we just run out of entertainment, all those nicely sawed logs there on the left were all cut by hand with a handsaw, because the guy on the left had nothing better to do except to, we told him we could probably break them or find smaller logs. And he really wanted to cut all those up, spent almost 3 hours cutting them into nice logs, and then burned them. But that's one of the things out in the wilderness. You can do what you want. Saw a painted turtle laying eggs. And it was at nighttime. This is with a flash. We're walking down by the boats by the water, and we heard it over there, and we noticed it. So even though it's brightly lit, it was actually in the darkness. And breaking camp and heading back out. McInnes Lake. But it's a beautiful area. You just don't have the ability to reserve your space. So if you were going to go, you need to have a backup plan, because if the parking lot's full, you're not going to get in and get a site. And we'll move on to the Sylvania. It used to be called the Sylvania Tract, and now it's the Wilderness and Recreation Area. This is on the western part of the Upper Peninsula. And it started back in 1895. Mr. Johnson had purchased 80 acres on the south end of Clark Lake, which is the first lake that you enter into. And he was going to log it. He did it as an investment. But after seeing it and walking it, he thought it was so beautiful that he decided to preserve it, and ended up, it started off as a private preserve, and then eventually went to the state. This is the primary access point on the west end of the park on Clark Lake. And some of the people here that have the kayaks, there's a campground there at the entrance that people can stay at and canoe around Clark Lake that don't actually go into the interior. But then later the Sylvania Club was formed by other friends of Mr. Johnson, as they bought more parcels to add on to his to expand this area. And they went from the Sylvania Club to the Sylvania Tract. And then the U.S. Forest Service bought that land in 1967. And that's kind of the pattern you'll see throughout Michigan, as they have acquired land into like the Huron-Manistee National Forest, the Hiawatha National Forest, is just a series of landowners eventually designating the land for preservation. And again, in 1987, as part of the Michigan Wilderness Act, it was also designated. And it's on the divide between the Mississippi River and Lake Superior drainage systems. So it's interesting, and depending upon what little lake is in there, where that water drains out of there. And this is one of those lakes that are being on the divide. It doesn't have a lot of water that feeds into it. Many of the lakes are deep. They don't have a lot of inflow. Most of it comes from snow and rain. They call that a flush rate, when a lake has water coming in and water coming out. And these are very low. So the nutrient concentrations in these lakes is very low. Fishing is quite restricted in here. Most of it's barbless, and in only certain species, no natural bait of any kind. So it makes these areas somewhat fragile, being the way that they're set up, with the water flowing out and not really in. So this is typical Portage from Clark Lake. We're moving on into Crooked Lake, moving on into the interior. And Sylvania is one of those that is mandatory reservations and permits. You can't camp anywhere in there without having a reservation for a campsite. There are no first come, first serve walk-in sites available in the interior. Just complete opposite of Big Island, even though it's still a wilderness area. The conservation rules are the same almost everywhere you go, but how you acquire and use those spaces changes. Just over 18,000 total acres today in Sylvania. And this is one of the interior lakes. This is another one of those small Adirondack boats using a kayak paddle. And you'll find most of the designated sites here have fire rings, again, to keep any type of fire use in a specific area. And you can only camp in those designated areas so you're not bushwhacking or putting anything anywhere. So you'll see the flamingo in other sites. The flamingo has been one of my companions throughout most of my wilderness camping. And it's, believe it or not, it's to protect myself from bear intrusions. And yeah, you will never see, and I challenge anyone to have ever seen a flamingo and a black bear at the same time. So, yeah, so I figure if the flamingo's there first, the black bear takes one look, runs away, and just it's just a little bit of a whimsy. It kind of takes the edge off when some of those long, creepy nights sometimes out in the wilderness, knowing that the flamingo is on guard. Here, the group sizes are also limited to a maximum of 10 persons, although 10 people can be at those campsites. And again, as the sun sets in these campsites, you just kind of enjoy the area and the fact that you're out there and there's really nobody else around. You can't hear cars or any type of noise. But there are some things you need to consider on a wilderness trip. Storing food off the ground, call this caching food. I usually use my throw bag, which I carry anyway. Other people use specific carbiners or pulleys to get their food up. I pack pretty light with food. Some people have heavier packs, but in almost any case, getting in a minimum of 10 feet off the ground is your best protection. And actually, I've had more trouble with mice and raccoons than I ever had with bears. But almost anything out there, when you bring your food in or anything smelly, if you leave it on the ground, the possums, the raccoons, the mice, they're gonna find it. So it's for the micro bears as well as the big bears. It's always important to talk to the park staff. I've run into lots of people over the years that tend to be ranger shy. They have questions and they read through the website and they don't understand one of the things. They have a question on something. Those park rangers love people to call and ask questions that are intelligent and trying to understand what to do. There's been many times when I've questioned how many cars I can park at a particular launch site, and you can't really get that information off from the website. Just call the park office and say, how many cars can park at the takeout on the east access point. Is also good to know about route suggestions. Tell them what your route is that you're planning, you're trying to put together. I've had rangers, come tell me it's like, that's kind of a really long way. Are you sure you want to go that far? And they'll explain some of the problems with that. And it's good to come up with a good plan if you don't have one of your own, or if you haven't been there before. Water purification is always necessary. Even if there isn't industrial pollution, there's bacteria and other things in your gut that aren't you're used to or welcome. So water filters, chemical filters, even boiling water as a last ditch effort are necessary. And keeping your gear secured in the boats and waterproof containers. I like these Portage packs. It's urethane, pretty waterproof, pretty rugged. They just go in and out in one heave and they clip in and works good for me. You have to do something a little different with kayaks, but they're real handy. They're basically a rubber Duluth pack. And the last thing is to have some type of a backup plan. Know all your access and egress points, alternative routes, trip options, what you would do in the case there was an emergency. You just want to think it through so that, and I've had those things happen, believe me. I've had people get sick. I've had people get GI problems. I've had all kinds of things happen of all the years. And it's nice to say, hey, I've already looked up the number for the medical help or the facility or the local sheriff or where the nearest point is. And it's like, we're gonna go get out at this spot instead of where our cars are, hike back and get the cars. But this is a spot that's the fastest way to get to definitive care. Cell phone service is totally unreliable. I've taken satellite phones into some areas just simply because of that. Bring a first aid kit, but know how to use it. Nothing's worse than, nothing should be in your first aid kit that you don't know how to use. I tend to go with a ton of gauze and a ton of tape. I don't bring the emergency amputation equipment. You're not going to use it. Some of the scissors and all the things in there, I mean, they can come in handy, but bring the stuff that you know you can use, that you're comfortable using, and take a wilderness first aid class. Take a basic first aid class so that when somebody is going out gathering firewood and they walk into a tree and knock themselves unconscious, everyone else isn't all freaked out, and you can help these people. So first aid is very important, and that's happened too.
You're
Just
the one that walked into the tree, or you?
No, I was the treater. No, I was the treater. I have had several wilderness first aid classes, and I'll just as the pitch for wilderness first aid classes, going through those classes, just like any type of training, your muscle memory it kicks in. It's amazing how calmer you are going through those practice scenarios with a person that's pretending to be a victim, and you're trying to triage them. And then when it happens in real life, it's like, get back, give them air, get the first aid kit out. Everyone isn't just running around in circles going, man down, man down. So, take a class. So one of the things that we did in Sylvania, as we do in many of these, we pushed in as far as we went, set up a base camp in the interior, and then we're basically going around in circles, traveling with unloaded boats. Makes it really easy to make single portages around the different areas. And these are well-traveled portages too. You can see how bare those routes are from the amount of traffic through there. And we'll end up with a 6-portage loop to get through the chain of lakes in the interior that we're not going to be camping at. Some of the access points, you've got a little bit of a hill to get up out of the lake, because they're kind of like pothole lakes. It isn't always quite this brambled going through there, but the foliage grows up pretty fast. But then you end up with these beautiful little quiet spots. And as the portage gets spread out and people go one at a time, you get to spend almost all of your time on that lake by yourself. I did see a loon with a chick, and we didn't get that close to it. This is a pretty good telephoto on the camera. As far as the picture, I don't think the loon would have tolerated me getting that close, but that was about as long a telephoto as I could get on it. This is just all different pictures of the interior of Sylvania, all natural. Some of this area has never been logged, some of it's virgin timber. But finally, we're going to make our way out of it, back into Clark Lake. Well-used portage trails. And then the bigger lake to get back to our campsite. I usually bring a small rain fly in case it sprinkles, just to have an area to cook and do your chores under with the little tents. And this is another food cache. There's 2 of them there, one in the distance, yellow and red. And then the plastic pails, they make good food storage too. That's up in the tree. And where the designated camping area was a little bit up this hill here. So this particular part of Sylvania had a little bit more elevation involved in it. And there was a bog kind of over to the back side of the campground on the other side of the ridge. And just quiet mornings, looking out at that. It sprinkled a little bit. Mostly it's just a little foggy here. And we're going to move on into another campsite making our way back out. We kind of planned our trip when we made all the reservations for the campsites. This particular site here has a lot of trees in it, and had a nice breeze coming off the lake, so we really enjoyed that.
What time of year was this?
This was early August. It was a couple weeks after the Big Island trip. We did these. These are 3 separate trips, all kind of put together. And then this is just looking out at some people passing by on Clark Lake, just out for a day paddle. We had very little. It was a fairly dry summer, and that really does keep a lot of the insects down. Wetter summers, it gets much worse, but if it's a hot and dry summer, by end of July, August, the bugs are pretty much non-existent. We did virtually nothing.
How long ago was this trip? Was it this year?
No, this was several years ago. Well, not several, a couple years ago. Wasn't a long time ago. And I've always been, I've been trying to look up the name of these things. Look at little teeny trees that grow on the ground, and I don't know what these are. And I've done this presentation several times, and I haven't been able for anyone to come. And I haven't tried on Google Lens, so I guess that's an option. But they look like this little teeny forest, 2 inches tall. I think it's cool.
I think it's a type of moss.
Type of moss? Okay, interesting. I usually forget about it when I'm not when this is over, but I've always wondered what that is. But this is one of the really nice sites in Sylvania. It's also one that you can hike to from the entrance. There is a backpacking trail that will access this campsite with the area in here with all the lower story of the forest is gone, and it's just open and very pleasant. And another some type of fungus growing up. We noticed when we were right by the campfire ring. I always thought that was a very Tolkien-ish ant-like tree. And even the leaning trees, they keep going. Just sunset in Sylvania. And in the morning it was foggy, and it was just a real quiet, peaceful paddle out in the fog. We just followed the right shoreline all the way out. It was the only way that we could really navigate, because you really couldn't see the far shore. So we just handrailed the right-hand shore to the takeout, so that we didn't get lost and make it back to where we started. And finally, the third trip that we did, this is towards the first part of September, it's before Labor Day, Nordhaus Dunes. This is on the west side of the state, and it's generally more of a hiking area, a beach area, but because this got into my category of paddling as far as I wanted to explore, because there is a small lake on here. So what we did is we came here with our boats, and we carried all of our boats and gear a half a mile into this tiny little lake, just to say that we paddled in Nordhaus Dunes and camped on it. It was also designated in 1987 as a wilderness area within the Manistee National Forest. And here you have interesting, have it marked here. The high water mark is up there on the tree where you can see the moss growing higher and it's gone. And then the low water you can see right there on the shore. This is early September, just prior to Labor Day, so it's pretty dry. But you can see the difference in water levels on this lake. And this is also one of those lakes that does not have any streams really flowing into it. In this case, in Nordhaus Dunes, it's referred to as an interdunal lake, essentially in the middle of the sand dunes. And rain and snow are the only source of water. So in the springtime, you have this really high water level, and it just drops. And there is absolutely no fish in here, although there are some small micro invertebrate creatures, but obviously you can't sustain fishing. So there's no inflow or outflow other than evaporation. It also makes it a fragile environment. And another reason why it's in a wilderness area, it needs to be protected, is that if anything gets tossed in here chemically, would never get out. That's one of the reasons why many of the wilderness areas have rules about the detergents, even the biodegradable ones, because they're just not going to come out of that lake because of the low flush rates. And this is our little campsite that we set up on the shore. Now, Nordhaus Dunes, different from the first two wilderness areas, you can camp anywhere you want. There are no designated campsites. You have rules to follow as far as being away from the water and fire impacts and things like that. But you just have your LNT camping rules, and you can camp anywhere. And there's good parts and bad parts about that. If you're doing it right, it's good, but it also allows bad or inconsiderate campers to leave messes. In our case, very LNT here, we didn't even have a campfire. And just some of the interesting fungus you see on the trees that were down. And this is all a regrown area. It's been logged off and replanted. Most of this area in the Nordhaus area was completely logged off in the early 20th century and has all been replanted. This is the one of the access sites to Nordhaus Dunes, and we were there on an off day, but on busy days, the parking here is ridiculous. You're parking out, it's like one lane traffic in and one lane traffic out at a time to try to get around, because the parking area holds maybe 20 vehicles, and then they put another 100 vehicles on the one side of the two track, and it only leaves you one lane. If you run it, you essentially run into each other coming in and out. So some of the congestion at the trailheads is a situation we run into some of our natural areas, where some of our areas are just loved to death. We all want our little piece of the wilderness, but so far as we wrap up into the third area, each one of these areas has different challenges in use and how it's used. This is back at our little lake we carried our boats in. And then after we spent the night there, we carried our boats all the way back to the cars and threw our backpacks on and did a short backpacking trip down to the lake through the dunes. And one of the features you'll see throughout here is that where this path has been worn off, obviously there's no grass under it, but this moss only grows along the side of the path. You kill off the natural flora, and then the moss moves in to the area that's been eradicated by the footpath. As you can see here again, moss, and you'll see this almost everywhere in the north, where the moss becomes the dominant flora along these footpaths. This is an interdunal wetland. This is a lot like that lake that we saw, except on a smaller scale. Rainwater and snow water have filled in a bowl or a depression, and it's just essentially standing water. Only certain plants and animals can live in these types of areas, and they do dry up. The Great Lakes have historically fluctuated in water levels. We've just come off a recent high water level on the Great Lakes. It's dropping back down into some of its normal lower points. And you can see that when you walk on the shore, some of the natural high water marks and some of the historical ones where you can see where there was actually a shoreline, some 200, 300 feet back from the side of the water. Here, the beach is being eroded into where these headlands have built up. So this is a area where the shoreline is receding because the beach is not really existent. Places where there's a long beach, you can see the water levels dropping. This is the foredune. This is the first barrier to the forest. And in most cases, all of this area would typically be covered with grass. It's our human traffic that opens up and clears out these areas in most cases where people have walked along these ridges. And I'm as guilty as that in walking because, you walk down to the shore and you're going to make a path and the flora is going to get eradicated in that path. But these are all natural areas and to be preserved. We camped here back of the foredune into the forest area, and we had to walk all the way down to Lake Michigan to collect our water and filter it and bring it back. In all of this area, we haven't talked that much about backcountry hygiene as far as human waste. That's a whole nother talk on its own. There's classes you can take on it. There's a great book out there on how to do that. But we follow the L&T principles are followed. Hap Wilson, he made a great point about human waste. He said, you can go out into the woods. You can't hardly ever tell where the moose or the deer went to the bathroom, but you can always tell where the people went. Yes, they are. Yes, they do have those are still there.
What are they?
There's a wooden potty, basically, that the Forest Service digs a hole and puts a wooden box. We call it a thunder box, and they basically have a small square wooden box that goes over a hole in the ground so that everybody uses the same spot. And then usually once a year, maybe every other year, they fill that hole in and dig another hole and move the box. So Nordhaus Dunes has about 3,400 acres, 4 miles of undeveloped shoreline. You can see here where people are making their path from the interior to the shore. But minimizing our presence is about the only way that you can preserve these wilderness areas. The grasses are important. The driftwood that gets in here is also used for stabilization. People like to dig those up and have nice beach fires, and that's a lot of fun. But you're understanding that this area is already unstable, and what little driftwood and beach grass is in there is what keeps that all together.
This is a great lake.
Yes, Lake Michigan. Just north of Grand Haven. So the further the dunes get away from the shoreline, they end up building up more of the brush, larger parts of the trees as the forest moves towards the lake if the lake is receding, and then further back. You do end up with some of these trees that are growing along the edge, and if the dune is receding, they'll get swallowed up. And if the beach is growing, then the forest will expand. They're very active areas. If you look at satellite photos of the shorelines in Michigan over the last 50 years even, it's dramatic changes. People that have built houses on dunes in the 50s are shocked that the dune is encroaching on their house. But these are natural activities, natural progressions. Some of the foredunes can reach up to 140 feet above the lake. And it might look like a great place to build your house, but the man who built his house on the sand, we know what happened to him. So we just explored and enjoyed this, and this was one of those off days. This gets a massive amount of traffic. It's also the same rules apply here. No wheeled vehicles, no wagons, no wheelbarrows. When we were leaving, we saw people stacking cases of beer on those plastic sleds and dragging them on the trails because they couldn't use a wagon, but they were getting their beer down to the shoreline. I got nothing against having a beer, but I just thought, that's a lot of work. But how can you have fun? How can you have fun without a beer? So Nordhaus Dunes is the northern half of the Big Sable Dunes complex. And like I said, it's immensely popular, attracts large number of visitors, and it's one of those areas that there are no restrictions on number of people or permits or camping. And if some of the places where there's access points, it does get just out of control. We probably packed out twice as much trash from other people on this particular day hike than we brought in from just our own little snacks. It was just a constant effort of picking up fishing line, picking up cans, picking up paper, picking up plastic. It just gets everywhere. And, part of it is just everybody wants to be here. And if you're going to do that, you have to do it right. You have to take care of it. Wilderness policies and rules allow all people to enjoy nature, but still allow for a healthy environment. So people and birds, they can still share the shoreline if you do it right. This is a brief list of the 15 areas. On the left is the ones that are in the state wilderness. We saw Big Island, Sylvania, and Nordhaus. Most of these others are in the UP, Sturgeon River Gorge, McCormick Wilderness, Delirium. It's in the eastern Hiawatha. Some are in Horseshoe Bay, which is up, I think that's northern Lake Michigan, north of Green Bay. Mackinac Wilderness, Rock River Canyon, and Round Island are all designated. And then the national ones, national wilderness areas, Isle Royal, Beaver Basin, which is part of the Pictured Rocks, Michigan Islands National Wildlife Refuge, Huron Islands, and Seney National Wildlife Refuge are all the 15 that we have today in Michigan. And we covered the 3 that are accessible by canoe, the easiest ones, but the others are all equally interesting to explore. Many more of them, like the McCormick, are more suited for snowshoeing and hiking, certainly not paddling. So that's the end. See you on the next trip. Any final questions?
Yeah, so I know up on Isle Royal, a lot of the inland lakes, a recurring concern these days is the toxic LJ blooms.
Mm-hmm.
Have you seen any of that at Sylvania or Big Island?
Not LG, no. Most of those areas, they had a lot of lily pad, but nothing, no algae really. Most of the lakes were very clear and cold. I don't know what the difference is in the 2 areas, but I didn't see that in those.
When you approach Portage, if you take your pack your stuff over there, then you got your food over there.
Mm-hmm.
Is someone guarding your